Badass of the Week is an iHeartRadio podcast produced by High Five Content. Theodore Roosevelt calmly draws a white handkerchief from his jacket, holds it to his mouth, and coughs into it. He inspects the cloth. There's no blood. That's good. It means he's not bleeding internally. He would know. In his long and colorful career, Roosevelt had been an amateur boxer and cattle rancher. He's fist-fought outlaws in the Dakotas, battled corruption as commissioner of the New York City's police department, served as president of the United States twice, created national parks, hunted lions in Africa, discovered uncharted wilderness in Brazil, received the Nobel Peace Prize for negotiating the end to the Russo-Japanese War, and also received the Medal of Honor for leading a cavalry charge into Spanish line infantry at the Battle of San Juan Hill, the decisive battle in the Spanish-American War, a war that he started almost unilaterally, despite having no authority to do so. It is October 14th, 1912, and Theodore Roosevelt has just been shot in the chest at close range by an assassin. As his supporters grab the gunman and restrain him, Roosevelt demands that no harm be done to the man. He tells the rest of his supporters to take their seats, because Theodore Roosevelt is about to give an 82-minute campaign speech with a .38 caliber bullet lodged in his chest. Hello, and welcome back to Badass of the Week. My name is Ben Thompson, and I am here, as always, with my co-host, Dr. Pat Larish. Pat, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay.
Good.
Looking forward to today's episode.
Yeah, we have a really special episode for you guys today. We have a really special guest that we're very excited to have on the show. I want to introduce Professor Greg Jackson. He's the host of History That Doesn't Suck. Greg, thank you so much for being here and giving us your time to come and talk about some cool historical badasses. We are very excited about the prospect of having an episode of this show that doesn't suck.
That was well played. It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me, Ben.
I've been thinking about that one. I've been working on that joke all day, so I'm glad that it.
Oh, it landed. It landed.
Oh, excellent. Well We're off to a strong start.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes.
So, Greg, why don't you just briefly kind of walk us through your show, what you do for History That Doesn't Suck, and kind of how you got into the idea of podcasting and creating your show.
Sure. So, the little tag I put at the beginning of every episode, History That Doesn't Suck, is a bi-weekly podcast delivering a legit, seriously researched, hard-hitting history of American history through entertaining stories. That really kind of sums it up. The thing for me, it was back in 2017 is when I started it. As you said, I am a professor. I'm a professor at Utah Valley University, and I was looking through podcasts, honestly looking for something that I would want to listen to. And there are plenty of wonderful podcasts out there, but I, in my mind, saw what, if you'll indulge a little bit of academia talk, I saw a gaping hole in the podcast historiography, if you will. Mm-hmm. In my mind, we had a lot of well-done, highly entertaining podcasts out there, and they were done by mostly either amateurs or just people who aren't trained in history. And then you had us academics who, bless us, we might get a little esoteric. We might lack at times on the ability to actually tell a good yarn, the irony for history. Story is in the word, but that's not the way that it works on the professional level. And in my mind, there was a way to merge the best of academia, the rigor, the systematic approach, the methodology that I was trained and taught to use through a PhD program, and so I wanted to take that, but merge it with some of the storytelling, the fun side, if you will, and part of that was driven by my classroom experience. My students love the way I lecture and tend to tell a story. I love to use stories to bring to life what are otherwise just names and dates. No one cares about names and dates, but when you get to know the person, then history comes to life.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. I've always kind of said that as well when people are talking to me about some of the badass stuff, where it's like, a lot of history tends to be a bunch of old dead white guys and you have to memorize their birthdays. And I think the people who who generally love history had one person who could make the stories real and make them real people who had like real problems and, and real challenges. And, for the Badass of the Week podcast, we actually need a 2-person team to accomplish what you're doing. Pat is the trained academic and I'm the amateur podcaster.
Storyteller.
Hey, but these are, I've come to appreciate very much in this process, how much, I'm of course not discounting that whole PhD process. Pat will tell you it's grueling and you get in crucial training, but storytelling is a separate skill set. It's an art, and having a PhD in history does not give you that. Pat, I'm sure you've seen this. We'll sometimes opine, like you get together at a conference and scratch their heads. Why are people not reading more of what we write? Well, that's because we don't. We don't tell stories very well. It sometimes feels like we are trying to lose people in jargon. So
we're good at footnotes.
We are. We rock the footnotes.
Footnotes that don't suck.
That's right. Chicago style for life. Yes.
So what are you working on now? So it looked kind of for history that doesn't suck. It looks like you're kind of taking a chronological approach to U.S. history. And so where are you at right now?
Yeah. So first of all, that's very intentional. Again, to the space I wanted to fill is that fun storytelling, gifted storytellers are inclined to methodologically basically create what we would call a survey in the college experience. I am intentionally creating a podcast that is a survey of U.S. history. To make it sound as boring as I can, this is your audio textbook. But of course, it doesn't feel like that. So I'm very forthright in what my goal is, and is to make this a textbook of sorts. But I've masked that medicine in the ice cream that is storytelling. So moving chronologically, yes. Sometimes some themes kind of make the chronology a little more difficult to do, but by and large, we managed to stick to that. Right now, we're wrapping up World War I. So just a few days ago, I recorded the first of a 2-part episode on the Meuse-Argonne offensive. That's the last major offensive of World War I. Pat, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Ben, not to dismiss you, Pat just really lit up. So,
well, isn't that, Ben, didn't we?
That's Cher Ami. We did Cher Ami.
Cher Ami the pigeon.
And of course, Cher Ami gets his moment, his time to shine, or get shot, as the case may be. Our brave little pigeon carrier. I'm not going up to present day. I've made that very clear to listeners every time they ask. I think there's a line to be drawn between being a historian and being a reporter. So I have no interest in crossing that line.
Okay. Well, when we asked you to come and you very graciously agreed to come join our show, we just said, who do you want to talk about? Who's your favorite badass from American history that you would want to talk about on the show? And you picked one of my favorites. So I was very excited. I'm very excited to talk about him. You picked President Theodore Roosevelt, who I love and who's awesome. And we are going to get into why very quickly. But Greg, can you give us just kind of a general overview of Teddy Roosevelt and why you picked him?
Yeah, Theodore Roosevelt is he embodies America at its best, I would say. When you think about the American dream, the idea of making yourself better, of striving for something greater. The man was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Let's go ahead and acknowledge that. But this is a man who, let's go back to even being a boy, right? And a child who read about great men in his era. Far more stories about men than women. So I do use that word very intentionally. This is the Gilded Age, progressive era. He's born even earlier. So, but he sees these role models. And he very intentionally says to himself, I want to be, not so much in he has plenty of ego, like any anyone who ends up in the White House, you got to have a pretty healthy degree of self-confidence, let's say. But this is someone who says to himself, I want to be a better person. I want to live up to the examples of the best who came before me. And he takes very intentional steps to do that. And that at its core is what I love about Teddy Roosevelt in terms of who he is and how he pushes himself. But then another thing I'd add to that, the second layer, the KO punch, since we are talking about a boxer here. Yeah, he was a president, but he's a boxer too. He's not just looking out for himself. He doesn't just want to be his best. He wants his nation. And by nation, he means his fellow Americans. He wants them to have their best opportunities, to be them, to be their best selves. It's so well summed up in his slogan as president, a square deal. He wants everyone to have a square deal. And by that, he means the ability to be their best selves, to be able to start a business or even just hold a decent job and have a fair shake. It's not to say you won't work hard or have struggles, but everyone should be able to have at least a fair shake. And he fought tooth and nail as a legislator, as a freaking rich New Yorker turned Badlands cowboy.
Yeah.
To a police chief back in New York, whether he's on the battlefield in the Spanish-American War, to president. I'm not saying that every decision he made was always the right one, but never once, in my estimation, did Teddy, even if he made a decision that was perhaps selfish for himself, I don't think he ever did so realizing it was selfish. He was always thinking about others.
Wow. Okay. Well, we are going to get into it. We're going to take a really quick break for a word from our sponsors. And then when we get back to it, we are going to talk about Theodore Roosevelt. Okay, welcome back. We are here with Professor Greg Jackson of History That Doesn't Suck. And Greg, we're going to talk about President Theodore Roosevelt, who is, in my opinion, and it sounds like yours, one of the most badass presidents in American history. But when he got started, like as a boy, he didn't project like he was going to become one of the greatest badasses in all of American history.
No, not at all. Theodore Roosevelt, he actually hated being called Teddy. Let's go ahead and acknowledge that. We all call him Teddy.
No.
Hated being called Teddy. His least favorite nickname. So we will call him TR or the Colonel. That was his favorite nickname, was the Colonel. He didn't want to be called President. He wanted to be called the Colonel as we get into his later years. But we're talking childhood, so let me dial that back. Young TR, Theodore Roosevelt. He's a very sickly child. He gets picked on quite a bit. And in fact, he gets beaten up at one point by, a group of kids. Today, we would talk about bullying and how not appropriate that is. This is the 1860s, and I don't know that conversation quite happened.
That conversation didn't happen for me in the 1980s, so I'm sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So when his father, sees, and TR's from a wealthy family, the Roosevelts are a deep-pocketed, blue blood New Yorker bunch. His father says, Teddy, because, he's little, you got to build yourself. You can't just build yourself here. TR's a thinker. He's smart. You got to build yourself here, pointing to his arm and flexing. And TR sets about doing that. His father, again, they're rich, right? So there's that luxury. His father builds a nice at-home gym for him. But as anyone knows who's ever either gotten a gym pass or gone for the at-home gym, just buying the Peloton doesn't do the trick. You can get the fancy stuff. You still got to actually sweat and work with it. And so sickly, asthmatic little TR, he works and works and works. And he actually overcomes asthma. Now, small medical disclaimer, I don't think that works for everyone with asthma. Please do not throw your inhaler away. His asthma was slight enough. I mean, it was significant, but slight enough. And I don't know the details, but he was actually able to overcome it, building up stronger lungs, building up his physical strength. And stronger heart, all that jazz. So he builds a body, and doing that, in his mind, it teaches him that hard work pays off, that we can build things. Of course, he gets older. He goes to Harvard because he's a blue-blooded rich. Yeah, exactly. Of course he goes to Harvard. He joins the boxing club. But again, this is not a kid who nature blessed physically, right? This is not the guy who magically would have been the captain of the football team. He has terrible eyesight. So he steps into the ring and he's got to take his glasses off. So imagine, this world without contacts. Imagine having blurry vision. You can't even see, and you got your dukes up. Someone's swinging at you. He doesn't
You're
care.
climbing into the ring with your glasses on, like, hang on, I'm going to take these off. The other guy's like, oh, I'm going to smoke this nerd.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. But he hangs in there. He succeeds in the Harvard boxing club. One of my favorite stories from his life, actually, is when he's a young Harvard undergrad. And he's in one of these fights. The bell rings. His opponent honestly didn't hear the bell. And TR, half-blind TR, lets his guard down. Boom. Gets smacked right in the face, right in the mouth. The whole crowd erupts, boos and hisses, absolutely angry. And TR calms the crowd down, smiles at his opponent, grinning with the blood between his teeth, and just says, "That's okay. You didn't know. We're fine. We're good." And they carry on about. I don't even remember which one of them won, but that little story, that moment, it sums up who TR is. Most of us can't take a punch to the face and smile through the blood.
Yeah.
TR, that's the type of person he is. And that follows him through his life.
Yeah, and he smiled through the blood. He reached out and made a connection with his opponent and was a really good sport about it. And he also read the room.
Yes.
He was able to connect with the crowd.
Yeah. It's all speaking to the sorts of things you need as a politician, which he very quickly becomes. He's barely out of Harvard, and he's in the New York State legislature.
There's one story I like from him at Harvard where, like, he was kind of talking a lot during class, and the professor got so flustered with him that he was like, "See here, Roosevelt, I am the one teaching this class." That's how I imagine him to be.
Well, and another important thing, I would call this one of his weaknesses. I love TR to death. None of us are perfect. Everybody has their imperfections, right? I wish TR was a little more constitutionally minded than he is, but that's also part of his goodness is that he's focused on people, and he doesn't like seeing technicalities get in the way of good. Of course, that can have problems because when you start blowing past technicalities, then bad people can do the same sort of things. But we start to see some elements of this even when he's a student, as he realizes he has no interest in studying the law. What does he want to do? He wants to write history. He's just writing history books.
As all cultured people do.
Yes.
Precisely. As one does. I hear really smart, cultured,
attractive.
Just, one might say ruggedly handsome people write history.
Definitely.
That's,
I mean, this is a podcast. On a podcast, no one can tell that you're ruggedly handsome.
Oh, my goodness.
Right, we have to tell them. We have to describe it.
Oh, yeah, we have to paint a picture in
well,
words.
and now I'll start blushing. My goodness. I wasn't doing the compliment, but thank you.
Listeners at home,
See, I was talking about myself, though. I was actually just talking about myself.
Okay.
Well played, Ben. I love that.
Yeah. Okay. So, TR.
So TR goes into the state legislature. He learns a lot of things. He's a staunch Republican, but he's quick to learn. So, for instance, he goes to pass some legislation related to tobacco. He's doing basically the bidding of the tobacco industry. And as he's going through this process, a man comes up to him and says, "Representative Roosevelt, I don't think you understand what you're doing and how that impacts me as an actual employee and worker in this industry. I invite you to come to my home and see what it looks like on the other side." I think I hate to say this, I think there are a number of politicians out there who would say, "Nope, I'm not walking into that.
Oh,
this
absolutely.
might be a trap," right?
Mm-hmm.
How'd you get in here?
Exactly.
Yeah.
TR says, "Absolutely. You got it. name the day and time. He goes to the man's home because the way cigars are rolled at that point, there isn't a factory. He walks in to this cramped, dumpy little, apartment, finds this immigrant living, in part of the apartment, basically, people living on top of each other. And it's him and it's his wife and it's his kids and everyone. They're all rolling cigars. And they start talking about the pay scale and how this works. And this is when TR goes, oh, I was not aware of this side of the coin. Right? He has these sorts of experiences. He's open to them. This is a man who's ready and willing to take in other sides. Now, it's not that he doesn't flip entirely either. I think this is the thing that I love and respect about Theodore Roosevelt so much. If you are truly on a polar extreme, he will never make you happy. As forceful and powerful as this man can be in the room and speaking his mind, he honestly is never the extremist. His speeches are, I love them. I think they would probably drive any political party mad, because instead of just going out there and hammering the talking points and calling it a day, he's caveating, nuance. This is why we need to take care of the businessman, because the businessman is taking these risks and putting this on the line. But we've created these opportunities for him. He doesn't have a right to walk on the working man. None of this happens without the working man. But the working man needs to be respectful of the right. So he's back and forth and back and forth.
A political moderate. Can you imagine?
It's and yet we think of him as pushing, as he does. He pushes the progressive era. So it's not like he's coming into this like chummy, hey guys, we should all just always meet in the middle. No, he's got positions that are definitely, pushing into new places. But he doesn't just kind of, go for, I'm going to out liberal or I'm going to out conservative everybody. He says exactly what he means. And he listens before he gets to what he means.
Yeah, that's really something we could use more of as well, I think. More of that kind of thing.
All part of why I love this guy.
Yeah. So he becomes the youngest state representative in New York State history at 23, which I think in one of the things I wrote about him once, I said that I spent most of my 23rd year playing Halo, and he was a state representative in New York, which is pretty amazing. And this is around the time he meets Alice, right?
Yeah. So he knows Alice at Harvard. In fact, she is present for that boxing match that if memory serves me, maybe I'm conflating boxing matches, but he would take her to the boxing match because, again, what's the era? I mean, we're talking late 19th century. We got some very classic ideas of masculinity. He's a man's man. This is a dude who steps into the boxing ring, right?
Hey, babe, watch me kick this guy's ass.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And, all the more reason to smile if he's got blood in his mouth, because he's got to show that even if he gets hit, man can take a punch, right?
Yeah. He can take a punch and be gracious about it and roll with it, and
because he's also elite, right? He's upper echelons. He's got to show that he is, even if he is a man's man, he's also a gentleman.
Yes.
Right. So he's all these things at once.
But he does ask her, and she says no the first time. So it didn't totally work. Just getting punched it took more than just getting punched in the face to win her over.
It did. Yeah. And for any listeners out there thinking that their romance life will improve if they get hit in the face in front of their love interest, that probably is not a solid play. I would not recommend that.
Badass of the Week does not endorse you getting punched in the face to impress your girlfriend. So TR and Alice, they get married. He has to ask her a couple times before she agrees to marry him. But then, fairly soon after they're married, there is tragedy, and just a really hard Valentine's Day for Theodore Roosevelt.
February 13th, 1884, if memory serves.
Yep.
He is in Albany with the state legislature. He's just had an amazing day, passed a bill. It's a really big deal. Congratulations everywhere. Telegraph's coming in. His child's been born. So he's on top of the world, right? Imagine this. Whatever your career is, you just got like all the accolades, big day. Your first child's been born. I mean, this is, especially in the era, right? This is quite literally the dude busts out the cigar and, pours a little tumbler moment. And then start coming telegrams that same day. Your wife's not doing great. Your wife's turning very poorly. You need to get home. You may never see her again if you don't get home. On the train, I can only imagine, right? This is not our modern era. There's no phone. There's no texting. He's not calling. No internet connection. And not even an old school phone call. Just sick to his gut for hours on a train. Gets off at what is today Grand Central Station. Then it was the train, Central Depot. Walks home, and death is knocking at the door. And same goes for his mom. Within a 24-hour cycle, his mother and his wife both die, leaving him a brand new father who's lost, as far as he's concerned, everything. His diary, this is, in my mind, one of the most expressive diary entries, and yet it is absolutely lacking in language. He simply writes, "The light has gone out of my life," with a big black X across the page. That is it.
Wow.
So just a really rough day really rough 24 hours for Theodore Roosevelt.
Now that we've officially bummed out all of your listeners.
Yeah. He goes into a dark place.
Very dark.
But he comes out of it in a very interesting way. Like, he decides to deal with that in a very interesting way. And it's by just going out west and becoming a cowboy, which is not anything close to what he's been doing or training for or has any experience with. He just decides, actually, I'm just going to get out of here. I need to change things up.
Yeah. So he is a young father. Again, social mores of the era are quite different from our day and age. He basically hands his baby girl off to his family, and kind of says, I need to disappear for a while. My goodness, I've never been in his shoes. I cannot even try to fathom what that's like. He's trying to wrap his head around fatherhood and the love of his life. It's not like this was a marriage of convenience. He loved his wife.
He had to work really hard to get her. He put a lot of effort into trying to make that happen.
So he's devastated. And then again, mom is gone, right? So much tragedy at once. So he, think about the era as well. We're in the 1880s. The closing of the frontier, quote unquote, as we often conceive of that, is 1890. So this is still the Wild West. This is a place where honestly, a lot of people who they want to have a fresh start, they want to hit reset on life. You head west. It's not like today where the internet is going to follow you with your resume out there. Or you have plenty of stories of people who really, they just botch it in life. They head west, they go west 1,000 miles. No one knows you. Nothing follows you. And, someone who might have been a low-level criminal in one town is now the sheriff out west. It's a fascinating phenomenon. But he heads out there and he continues to build that body of his, this rugged, rough life. He puts on 30 pounds of muscle. If you've seen the photos of young Theodore Roosevelt as a student at Harvard, dude looked like a circa, as a child of the 80s and 90s, dude looked like a 1990s Abercrombie and Fitch model. There's this photo of him kind of seated with his arms crossed in a chair, and he has no shirt on, just pants on. I believe he'd been rowing. He's already ripped, and so now we're just building on even more. He ends up doing a bit of law enforcement, playing kind of the sheriff role. My favorite instance is in the Badlands. He goes into a bar one night, gets a drink, and as happens out in the Wild West, he gets this character who starts kind of giving him a hard time. He's calling him Four Eyes. TR lets it slide a few times because, again, he's a gentleman, right? He's a gentleman. He's a cowboy now. Cowboys are gentlemen. That it all fits. And this guy just won't let up. He tells TR that he is going to buy him a drink, and he's starting to get a little rough. So finally, Teddy's done with it. The four-eyed boxer puts his beer down. This guy has guns. He's pulled guns. Let's not forget that part of the story.
Yeah.
boom, slams him in the face. Just a 1-2 punch. This guy is on the ground. His guns go off as he's falling, knocked out. The whole bar just erupts in cheers because they all know that this guy's a total dirtbag.
Yeah, it's probably not the first time he's done this.
Exactly. He harasses people. He threatens, menaces, he uses his guns to force, people he thinks are weak to buy a beer. TR, he hates bullies. Remember his childhood?
Yeah.
The weak kid. Yep. There's nothing that gets under his skin more than a bully. He built the skill set and the body to be able to deal with bullies. So
Yeah, and there's another story from that time period where these guys steal his boat. Like this guy named Mike Finnegan and these two other guys steal Roosevelt's boat. And then he's so upset about it, he tracks them down for like 2 weeks. He pursues them through the Dakota Badlands until he finds them and kicks their ass and gets his boat back.
Exactly. TR were alive today. He's the type of guy who'd put, one of those Apple AirTags on his computer or whatever, or used to like find my phone, someone stole his thing. He would show up at that person's house.
Yeah.
Pound on the door when they open it, just deck
you
them.
Stole my Amazon package.
Yeah.
Just the hero that we all need.
It's true. TR's the neighbor we all want. And that's kind of what he became, as president, right? That the idea that he wanted to, for all of his imperfections, again, I don't want to say like the man walked on water. Of course he didn't. But that's the kind of attitude he carried with him. He had a very strong sense of justice for himself and for others. And when that went awry, it set him off.
And he applied that a couple of years after the Badlands, that sense of justice, when he became the police commissioner for New York.
Yes.
He returned and was one of the younger police commissioners in NYPD history. But I love the stories from that time period of him kind of dressing up like a patrolman and walking the streets, even though he was commissioner, which I believe was an elected office at the time.
Yeah, so he is commissioner and, or one of, excuse me. I believe there are 4, if memory serves. But actually, my favorite instance is the way he policed his own police, his men. So he wouldn't just walk the beat, which he was happy to do. He would walk in the middle of the night, go out with his buddy Jacob Riis, famous author of the era. The two of them had become tight. And he would, very much dressed down. He'd just go up, check out what the officers are doing, and he was taking down names. Of course, the officers thought nothing of it, right? They just think, who's this jerk out at 3 a.m.? Well, that jerk is actually someone who can get your badge taken from you.
Yeah.
And he's noting that you are with a prostitute at 3 a.m., not walking the streets like you're supposed to be. And he would confront them. So he really cleaned up, nothing but love and respect to any police officers listening. But corruption is a thing in any organization. He went in there and rooted out a lot of corruption in the New York police force.
A lot of the cops I know also hate corrupt cops. So
right?
That's one thing we can all agree on is that we want to get rid of the corrupt cops that are taking bribes from the mafia guy.
Exactly. And nothing ruins that more, right? This is an important institution and a position of trust. And TR understood that, and he was going to make sure that NYPD lived up to that. And
so in 1897, he gets bumped up to be the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. And how does that happen from a police commissioner to the Assistant Secretary of the Navy? Is he just kind of...
Honestly, we're into networking. He's dialed in, he's plugged in, he's an important mover and shaker within the Republican Party. That's really kind of how he even got to police commissioner. And he does have a military draw, so he's interested in that. And most importantly, within that position, he's all about modernizing the Navy. And keep in mind that the United States doesn't really have much of an army. There is an army at this point, but since the Civil War, the U.S. Army has been collapsed significantly. It's a very small force. That's where by the time we get to World War I, there's going to be hardly an army to enter the war. We're really just talking like forts out west. That's kind of it. So the Navy is America's big military branch. Of course, there's no Air Force yet. The Wright brothers are 5 years out from their monumental flight. So it's all about the Navy, especially for a country that is now sea to shining sea, occupies the coast of the Pacific and the Atlantic, is very much cut off in many ways from Its main trading partners still very focused on Europe. Plenty of trade with Latin America, yes, but a lot of that's reached by ship. So in this world, really, the Navy is most important. But he's all about modernizing it. We have new technologies coming out. We're still pre the Dreadnought, which comes out in 1906. But he wants to see the United States able to handle itself. And then, of course, the Spanish-American War comes along.
Right, which I have heard stories that he basically like unilaterally declared war, even though he had absolutely no authority to do so.
Okay, so this, right, as I mentioned, I love TR, some of his imperfections. One of the weak points of someone who has a strong moralistic sense is if they then start thinking that, well, they must be right unquestionably, and will kind of push some things that maybe aren't theirs to push.
Benevolent dictatorship is the best form of government, right?
So he does. I mean, and obviously he's not the one. Congress declares war. That's how it works. The president holds the power. But while his boss is away, this cat does play. He does what he can to make the most of things that are brewing in the as we get to the explosion of the USS Maine. And so he's a strong proponent. His boss basically comes back, is like, what the hell have you been up to?
Yeah.
And pretty quick he's like, oh yeah, hey, sorry about that, by the way, peace out, I quit because army time.
Yeah, exactly. So the USS Maine blows up in harbor. America sends a warship to Cuba to cause trouble with the Spanish who are holding Cuba at the time. They also sail it. The Maine gets blown up, possibly by just a drunk sailor on the boat. We don't really know.
We still and never will know the cause. Yeah, but yellow journalism at its finest was happy to be like, this is super Spain's fault.
Yeah, definitely Spanish. Definitely the Spanish snuck into the harbor and blew up our boat. And so then Roosevelt sends, Admiral Dewey's fleet to the Philippines, which is also controlled by Spain at the time, and gives the order for Admiral Dewey, who famously says, "You may fire when ready, Gridley." Yes. And they sink the entire fleet stationed at outside Manila in about 4 hours. And now we're at war, and it's mostly Teddy Roosevelt's fault. And then, like you said, he just completely bails. He's like, all right, yeah, I quit, and I'm going to go raise a regiment of cavalry and go fight in this war.
Which, so many things that we could get into, right, about the issues of the Spanish-American War. Having this war, its real purpose, the righteousness or lack thereof on it, setting those, not dismissing them, but since that's not our focus is TR and who he is. I think it's very interesting to see a guy who says, let me walk away from my cushy job that's pretty high ranked, pretty significant, because I want to be at the front. I want to risk getting shot at. It's not that the man has a death wish, but again, it speaks to he believes in this cause, and he is not about to have a war happen where he's not the one who takes the risk. He is not. I think there's something very commendable to a leader who says, war has been declared. I'm not going to sit here and send young men to die. I am going to go out there with them and risk the chance that I might die.
I think we need more of that today, too, honestly.
These are, again, these are the things that I really admire and appreciate about him. Yeah.
And so he goes off to the war. He raises a volunteer cavalry regiment, the Rough Riders, and it all works out for them. They get their moment of glory in fighting in Cuba.
Yep. Kettle Hill, to be clear, it's Kettle Hill. Let's just go ahead and clarify that.
I heard San Juan Hill.
Yeah, I know. It's the Battle of San Juan Hill. They're on the smaller hill next to it. It's Kettle Hill. Everyone thinks that Teddy went up the other one, but
they're getting their picture taken in front of the wrong one. It's like Bunker Hill. This Bunker Hill's the same thing. The battle was on Breed Hill.
Exactly. Yep. It's exactly that thing.
Yeah. But they charged the Spanish at the Battle of San Juan Hill, which took place apparently on the other hill. And
Kettle Hill, come on.
Yeah, it doesn't have the same ring to it, right?
Battle of Kettle Hill, it sounds like a cartoon,
It does. It really does.
Yeah.
But this is an important catalyst to him becoming president in many ways. TR has made himself too many enemies in his party. The man, again, he's not playing by the rules enough, right? So they want to get him out of the way. And they have to worry about getting him out of the way because the people like him so much. The dude's a war hero. The man's built such a reputation.
You got the Medal of Honor.
Right. So when you have a Medal of Honor recipient who is known for, being a badass out in the Badlands and cleaning up the streets and kicking out corruption in New York, and now he's a war hero. Yeah, this guy is really starting to look like a presidential contender, but the Republican Party is terrified of him because he doesn't toe the party line enough.
Follow the line, yeah.
So what do you do when you got someone like that who's popular, but you want to get him out of the way? Vice president.
Nice.
Well, nice. From the party's point of view, how does this sit with TR?
Well, yeah, TR is not necessarily a big fan of this position. The party itself actually has plenty of consternation within it. He actually was interested in being governor of New York. That was his draw. He's being pushed and pressured towards jumping on the ticket. Obviously, he ultimately goes for it. But you have other party bosses outside of New York who are going, "What are you doing? You just put this damn cowboy," to quote them, you just put that damn cowboy a heartbeat away from the White House, which, of course, they're thinking, Will's our boy, right?
Yeah.
Will's healthy. He's good. That's not a problem. But assassins can make healthy presidents
unhealthy. Yeah.
And of course, he's assassinated September 1901. A meet and greet, and out comes a gun. He struggles for his life for a bit, but very quickly, early on in this second term, and that turns out to really be TR's first term. And of course, he runs with it. This is not just an accidental president who is gonna be a placeholder.
Yeah, he's been planning for this, and the assassination happens very early after the inauguration. So he's got like the full term here,
pretty much
to operate with.
Yeah, and here he goes, making some serious waves as he pushes for his vision of what will give the American people a square deal.
And so, what does that look like as president? Because that's kind of how we all think of him as being the president. And so he did a lot of things that I think are really pretty amazing.
Yes. So there are a few things that he does. I mean, the 3 C's are probably the best way to sum him up quickly. Consumer protection, corporate regulation, conservationism. That's how historians...
Canal in Panama.
Yeah, so that'd be the 4th C, right? In broad strokes, good grief, it's more like, what doesn't he do? He basically, we had our first national park out there. That process had begun, but he expands national parks in an absolutely unprecedented way. He preserves forests. He's very concerned with nature. Something that would probably surprise some people to know in our modern way of thinking of things. He's a massive conservationist because he is a hardcore hunter, and he
has to pay attention to the ecosystem.
Exactly. So he understands that he has to respect and care about nature if that is going to continue. So that's where his deep love and protection his conservationism, protection of nature, that's where it originates. Keep in mind that we're coming out of this era where the buffalo has nearly been annihilated. And TR, he feels the nation standing on this precipice of destroying its natural beauty and several various species. And he goes, we have to take steps to ensure that these things will survive in perpetuity.
That we don't bulldoze this forest and put a factory in there.
Exactly. And yet he's no enemy of quote unquote progress either. These are the sorts of nuances I really respect and appreciate about him. He understands the need for big business. In fact, one of the things he complains about when Howard Taft comes in as president after him is he says Taft's just breaking up big corporations because they're big. That's not why you break up a corporation. You break up a corporation because they're abusing their power and their size. And, that to me just, it again shows it's a thoughtful approach. Anyhow, I've jumped all over the place, but that does get to his trust busting. Taft will actually bust more trust than him, but TR is far more famous for it. He starts this process. And trust, by the way, that's just the term for like massive freaking companies.
Yeah, huge monopolies that are basically abusing their workers and making prices, abusing consumers and employees. And
the thing that's crucial, I think, to understanding why TR is the one who starts this down this road. First of all, it should have been done sooner. But we're coming out of the Gilded Age, and companies on the backs of railroads, a far more interconnected nation. The shifts of the Industrial Revolution has allowed the creation of products and the movement of products on such a far larger scale and level that this is the first time we have several of these super trans-state, I'll say, corporations. Previously, if you go back to, say, the Revolutionary Era, John Hancock, richest guy in Boston. Okay, but him being the richest guy in Boston pales compared to Rockefeller or J.P. Morgan and so forth being the richest Americans.
Right. It's like the billionaires today, too, right? Where it's just like you cannot imagine the scope of how much money they have, right? And it's
right. Yeah. So that's what he's tackling is a new problem. This isn't something that presidents before the Second Industrial Revolution even had to grapple with. We've never had companies of these sizes before. And he has no problem grappling with it, which is a real struggle for, suddenly Republicans usually consistently falling with in line with big business. And now you've got big business and they don't know what to do with this guy because he's also kind of one of them. He's a blue-blooded New Yorker. And he's sort of with them at times because he doesn't always go along with everything that, the striking parties want. He really wants them to just sit at the table and have a square deal. So it just perplexes. It's really funny to see like the donations that come in from, say, Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan when he runs for president his second term. One of them said, we bought the son of a bitch and he didn't stay bought.
Yeah.
Because they donate thinking they're going to get curry favor. TR doesn't do that. TR's not about favors. He's going to stick to his sense of morality.
Yeah, which is great, which is another thing that we need more of in politics and in business and in all aspects of our lives. So that's the first two C's, right? We hit conservation and we hit corporate
regulation.
What was the third one?
Consumer protection. I think, your go-to example there is the FDA. There are other examples, but he's the one who creates the Federal Drug Administration. And, it's really funny.
Deal with all those snake oil salesmen.
Yes,
he ran into out west.
Well, but the really funny thing is the impetus for that is reading The Jungle. Now, The Jungle is a book by Upton Sinclair, as you're familiar. And Upton Sinclair is actually a devout socialist trying to push socialism. The story is meant to talk about the struggle of the workers. And of course, in the end, they unite, right? And socialism, happily ever after, is his take, right? Because he's a devout, believing socialist. So it's the answer. Well, a lot of Americans do start reading the book because it is a compelling read, but they're not getting the Marxist message that he wants. They're like, whoa, 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 whoa. There's what in my meat?
Yeah.
Whoa. So,
which, to be fair, is a useful message to be getting.
It is. But Upton opined that I meant to hit them in their hearts and I hit them in the stomach, which I just think is hilarious. So, Teddy reads this and he's like, okay, this is a problem. Now, he's not going to trust the socialist because, again, this guy, he's just not extreme in any direction, right? But he's also not going to discount the socialist. So he sends his own investigators to go look at meatpacking plants and say, okay, I don't know if I can buy what Upton's selling. No pun intended, as we're talking about socialist author, but that's okay. But I want you to go look into this, right? Is this true? And of course, yes, it is. That Upton's research in his process for writing what was a work of fiction, but nonetheless, it was a very realistic depiction of the horrendous process by which meat was being prepared, and like sawdust is being used to basically you get ground.
That's not gluten-free.
Yeah, no, super not gluten-free. Not in the least. Very unsanitary practices. So the FDA is born in an effort to protect Americans.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to have to stop here because we have to go do ads real quick. Okay, welcome back. Let's continue. The big work that he completes, so he does the FDA, all of the national parks, huge amounts of national park, and the big ones, right? Yosemite, Yellowstone. Yep. And then he builds the Panama Canal to help with trade and shipping and basically all manner of makes everybody's life easier to have the Panama Canal. I guess except for Panamanians.
Remember, well, actually, the Panamanians like it. It's Colombia that doesn't like it.
Okay.
So he's good with a coup that didn't necessarily need to happen. But that's a very, man, I'd need like an hour for that. Well, and that's what I took in my own episode. But the Panama Canal has been a dream for people around the world for, centuries in some ways. And there are certainly a million problems with how it's brought to fruition, but TR is the one that pushes this thing through after the French absolutely fail to do it. Now, it's not actually completed until Woodrow Wilson's presidency, but the Panama Canal does not happen without Theodore Roosevelt. Yeah. And one of the most badass photos of TR is him in his white Panamanian, hat and his linen suit. How that thing is pristine, I have no idea. Sitting at the controls of one of their big, I think it was an excavator of sorts, on his visit to the Panama Canal during its construction.
That's awesome. And one thing I love about Roosevelt at this point is that he helps negotiate the end to the Russo-Japanese War. So yes. Russia and Japan are having territorial dispute in the Manchuria area. They're having a war. It's pretty bloody. And Roosevelt comes in and he helps negotiate the peace, which is cool. But the thing that I really like out of that story is that he receives the Nobel Peace Prize for brokering the deal. And
he does.
It makes me think, like, how many people in history have received the Nobel Peace Prize and also their country's like highest medal of like military bravery.
Prowess, yeah.
That's like him and maybe like Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. I don't know, but like I can't imagine there's many people who have like that version of the EGOT, like the two two things.
Right. Yeah. Well, and in so many ways that does, it sums up the the speak softly, carry a big stick. TR,
which is a quote that is attributed to him generally.
Yes. Yeah. It sums up his foreign policy. This is a guy who is not afraid to throw a punch, but he also doesn't seek to. And I really do think, not to overly play child psychologist, but it goes back to, this kid who didn't like bullies. And you can see elements of that as imperfectly as it may have been executed at various points. You see that thread follow him throughout his entire life. This is a man who stands up to bullies. It doesn't matter if that bully is a big corporation. It doesn't matter if that bully is perhaps in some way the union that's engaging with that corporation. It doesn't matter, is it a legislator? Is it a foreign country? And not to say he always calls it right, but when he sees a bully, he stands up.
Yeah.
And so, but not everybody loved Teddy Roosevelt because somebody took a shot at him.
Absolutely. And look, if everybody loves you, you're probably not actually standing up for anything. It's impossible to be liked by everybody. And I realize that TR isn't everybody's cup of tea, and there are plenty of good reasons, or plenty of valid reasons for that. After he leaves the White House, Howard Taft succeeds him. He thinks Taft is going to be, basically him 2.0. In his estimation, Taft is not. Taft feels like he's carrying on their legacy just fine. But TR comes back and says, fine, I'm going to run for president again. Splits the Republican Party. We end up with his own party, the Bull Moose Party. which effectively just splits the Republican ticket and ensures that Democrat Woodrow Wilson ultimately wins. But during this campaign, a would-be assassin does approach him as he's getting into a car and shoots him. The bullet hits his speech. It's a 50-page speech folded up. So those 100
so it's
pages...
basically a Kevlar vest.
It's close to that. That slows it down, and then it hits his spectacles. He had in his pocket the case. It's a strong metal case. It deflects the bullet a bit too, so it does go in, but it doesn't get into his lungs. So he notices after he gets shot, he's breathing. Again, this is a colonel, right? The man has seen a lot of death and injuries on the battlefield. They want to rush him to the hospital. He's got a speaking event. He's sitting there going, no blood when I breathe. Take me to my speech.
I can use this.
Dude wraps it up. Yeah, does his best to keep the blood, but of course it seeps through. He's up there. He just goes on. He does his thing. The dude speaks. He's got a bullet wound in him. He's bleeding out at the podium as he shares his message.
It's Kurt Schilling in the World Series.
Yeah, exactly, man. If there is an act of presidency that's more badass than that, it's not coming to mind for me right at this moment.
I don't. Yeah, it would be extremely difficult to top that. The war hero, Nobel Peace Prize winner, giving a speech with a bullet in his chest. And I think he opens the speech with that, like, "Hey, if I might have to make this short because I got shot in the chest like 5 minutes ago, and I have to go to the hospital."
Talk about street cred, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's up? It's still in my chest. Let's talk.
I'll fight for you guys.
Exactly. Yeah.
So he doesn't win that election, and he kind of retires. And in his retirement, he does very Teddy Roosevelt things, he does very Theodore Roosevelt things. He goes to Africa and he hunts leopards and rhinos and elephants. Yep. He goes to Brazil and explores the Amazon River and gets a tributary of the Amazon named after him. He's actually very famous. My wife is from Brazil, and I spend a lot of time down there, and they love him down there because...
There you go.
Yeah, because he...
he nearly dies in the process.
Yeah, he almost dies in the process. The guy that took him through on that trip, Candido Rondon, has like a state named after him in Brazil. He's this huge hero down there. He was the guide on that trip, and he's like a really, really interesting guy. I want to do an episode about him at some point in the future.
Yeah.
So we'll do that. But Greg, we've kept you for long enough. We've covered most of the broad strokes of Theodore Roosevelt. You dig into it a lot deeper on your podcast, History That Doesn't Suck. So if you guys enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to go and listen to that. Greg, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking out your time to come talk to us here. And is there, where can people find you? Are you on social media at all?
I am HTDS Pod on Twitter, and just History That Doesn't Suck on Insta, Facebook. And of course, just wherever you get your podcasts, History That Doesn't Suck. HTDSpodcast.com is my website. So you can, I have a national tour going on right now. If you'd be interested in seeing me live, you can get the details there and everything else that I'm up to.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate having you.
Hey, my pleasure.
And thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, stay badass and carry a big stick. Badass of the Week is an iHeartRadio podcast produced by High Five Content. Executive producers are Andrew Jacobs, me, Pat Larish, and my co-host, Ben Thompson. Writing is by me and Ben. Story editing is by Ian Jacobs, Brandon Phibbs. Mixing and music and sound design is by Jude Brewer. Special thanks to Noel Brown at iHeart. Badass of the Week is based on the website badassoftheweek.com, where you can read all sorts of stories about other badasses. If you want to reach out with questions, ideas, you can email us at badasspodcast@badassoftheweek.com. If you like the podcast, subscribe, follow, listen, and tell your friends and your enemies if you want, as we'll be back next week with another one. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.